Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode. Uh, this particular one will start off with a quick recap. So, we're going to recap Genesis chapter 1 through 7, and I'm going to do this as efficiently as I can. Uh, Genesis 1 discusses the creation of the heavens and the earth. Now, what's interesting about this is just the logic and the intentionality behind everything and the behind the order of creation. And then we're going to contrast that to the theory of evolution and the Big Bang theory, because we're going to expose some big holes in this theory that has been redacted so many times. Um, so, for starters, we're going to start with the biblical account of creation, right? So, God starts off by creating, we'll just say the heavens and the earth, right? That's just putting it broadly. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, right? But then Genesis chapter 1 breaks down uh, the creation of the heavens and the earth and everything in them. It kind of zooms in, and we learn that the Spirit of God is hovering over the face of the waters, which He also created. So there's waters, right? Then He says, "Let there be light," right? And then He separates the light from the darkness. And then He says, "Let the dry land appear." So there are three things there that are going to be very significant. The first is water, the second is light, the third is earth. Those are three main ingredients that we need in order for what comes next. God creates vegetation and plants, and also seeds with uh, with the information that's needed to create plants, to reproduce plants after their kind, right? Then he creates luminaries, right? So we already know he created uh, light, right? He said, "Let there be light," but the luminaries are actually sources of light. Light is the wavelength. It's interesting because according to physics, light is both a particle and a wave, right? It behaves as both. And so when God created light, He defined it, its speed, how it would behave, uh, you know, different things about it. But then when He created the luminaries, that was creating actual emitters of light, right? This energy that He created. The luminaries would emit that energy, right? Then He creates animals, and then He creates human beings. So clearly there's an order, right? There's a logical order. Everything that's created depends on what was made before. Contrast that to the theory of evolution and the Big Bang theories, which suggest that an explosion created everything. Uh, so, what's interesting about this is it's dumb. Let's be honest, because exploding anything will not yield a it will not create, it will not produce anything. For example, if we exploded, if we blew up trillions of cars, for example, right? There are panels on cars. Cars are they've got wheels, right? What else? Um, they've got a whole bunch of moving parts in them, right? If you blew up trillions of cars, let's say quadrillions of cars, they would not become bicycles, skateboards, or anything useful. 100% of the time, for all of those trillions of cars that were blown up, you'd have nothing except chaos. right? There is no chance in a trillion, a quadrillion, no chance at all that blowing something up will magically put together something that makes sense and functions in an orderly way. There's not a chance. So when people talk about, billions of years, for the record, evolution started off like this. There were, let's say, about 70,000 years of evolving that animals had to do, right? From the very beginning of the world. Then, when scientists realized, so-called scientists, because the Bible says that there is something that is so-called science, and then there's actual knowledge and wisdom. But of course, some people profess themselves to be wise, and the Bible kind of calls them out on it because they've truly become fools, right? But when these so-called scientists realized that 70,000 years was not enough, it started to grow. Okay, let's try 1,000,000. Million's not enough. Let's try 1,000,000,000. Let's try 300 billion. And the number keeps growing and growing, or we'll just say it has grown from its inception, which I don't know. I fail to see how adding more numbers makes the math work, because no matter how many trillions and trillions or quadrillions of cars in that car example that I gave that you blow up in this hypothetical situation, nothing complex or even simple, no simple machine would be constructed or would automatically it's impossible. It's impossible. I'm trying to explain something and make it sound smart, but it doesn't. I mean, how can scientists really assume something so ridiculous? Anyway, we'll move along to the single cell that appeared, right, according to this theory. And so it appeared. It's convenient, but what did it eat? It appeared before its own food, which it then became, because these protozoa, right, they were the first life forms. They showed up on Earth, right, randomly popped up. They knew they had to reproduce, right, through cellular division. They eventually became plants and other animals and things like that. But what did they eat? And when did they decide, okay, we haven't evolved into even an eyeball yet, so we cannot see anything, but somehow we're going to be separating ourselves from now on into male animals and female animals. And although we evolve randomly, cluster A is going to be a male that resembles cluster B, which is a female, for every animal species. So from now on, if, for example, we're going to evolve into something that will one day be called a tiger, the male tiger will look similar enough to the female tiger so that they can be attracted to each other and compatible and have tiger babies. How did this happen if we know that evolution is all random? Dear theoretical scientists, I know you hate God. I really know that you do. Because no matter what, whenever the math or the science points to God, you look the other way and you say, no, it couldn't be that. And you try to make up an other answer. But dear scientists, so-called scientists, if you didn't have your loyal fan base of people who also don't like God and either won't admit it, or if they do, it's always because, oh, I don't like him because wars were started in his name, which is false, by the way. It was started by people who misrepresented God. It was started by people who call themselves also so-called Christians who are not. And the Bible talks about them too. They're not. And to this day, FYI, I'm not going to put them on blast on this video, but there's a certain group of so-called Christians who make up, you'll see them in Hollywood movies and stuff like that. Anytime you need a Christian, right, it's 9 times out of 10 gonna come from that particular denomination, and they are not Christian as a whole. Yes, there are some devout, oh, you know what, I might as well say it, Catholic Church, sorry. But yeah, the wars were started by them, not by real Christians. So that being said, the Bible does talk about them, by the way. It doesn't call them Catholics. A lot of times the Bible doesn't have a word for certain things like homosexuality, but it does in accurate detail discuss the behaviors. It discusses the culture, right? How they teach and promote their doctrines, those kinds of things. That being said, going back to these so-called scientists, you guys, if you didn't have your fan base of people who also hate God because of so-called wars and so-called hate speech, which it's not. When people tell the truth, it's not hate speech. People can have civil discussions and not agree with each other. That is possible. It is possible to love your neighbor and not agree with their lifestyle. That is possible. But yeah, if it wasn't for your community of supporters, I think most people would see like right through, your false doctrines. They would see right through that and just laugh at, or maybe cry because of how foolish you are, Anyway, this video isn't for you anyway. If you see it, great, but it's not for you. It's for people who kind of want to learn more about the book of Genesis and what the Bible actually has to say about how things were really made. So I digress. Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is a clear continuation, and it also zooms into and elaborates on day 6, right? So some people, they falsely believe in something that's called a gap theory. And all I can say on that is if it doesn't expressly say that in the Bible, or there's nothing you can really cross-reference with it, chances are that it's not legit. So that being said, I loved the garden sprinkler hose system that God had going on with the mist that came out from the ground before man was around to till the ground, right? I like the surgery that God performed on Adam. He put him to sleep, opened him up, took the rib out, right? Closed the flesh, and then created his wife, almost like a clone, right? But what's interesting about that is, and this is why I've stopped reading commentaries or relying on commentaries. It's okay to read them sometimes, but let the Holy Spirit be your guide, because so many commentaries that I was reading when I was trying to figure out the significance of the rib, so many commentaries were telling me that Genesis was allegorical and God didn't really remove a rib. It might have been part of Adam's genitals. But in every translation, doesn't matter if it was Spanish or French or what have you, it said rib. And I know that God is accurate with words. When he's being figurative or poetic or anything like that, we know there are certain literary cues that let us know, okay, he's not being literal right now. This is a metaphor, for instance, right? But when he said rib, when the Bible says that God removed a rib, he removed a rib. Now, for Christ followers who don't know too much about science, please do not stop promoting this theory that men still lack a rib to this day. No, we do not. We have exactly the same amount of ribs as women do. Now, the significance of the rib has to do with the studies that have been done regarding the fact that during a surgical operation, if the rib is properly removed, it is the only bone in the body that has been known to fully regenerate. So what God did was he took a piece of Adam that he knew would grow back, and he created Eve. And I know it doesn't happen these days. Men and women are born from women. We know this, right? But the duality of the sexes, the gender binary, exists within men's DNA, scientifically proven. Real science confirms this because we have X and Y chromosomes. In a world of only women who could, let's say, if they could reproduce asexually, women would only be able to beget women. But if by some horrendous tragedy, if men were the only ones left on Earth, scientifically and theoretically, you could recreate women. And that's because all you would need would be 2 X chromosomes from a man, because men have both X and Y. That being said, it makes sense why God could do that, right? Anyway, chapter 3 deals with the serpent, and the serpent caused sin and rebellion to enter the world with a question to make Adam and Eve question God and God's authority. Adam sinned, and both of their eyes were opened, when Adam also ate from the fruit. Now, notice that Satan did not completely lie to Eve. He deceived her, yes, and deception works by mixing truth with lies. Look at what happened, even in the past 3 years, for example, with the virus that took place, right? The outbreak, the pandemic, right? There were so many lies, right, that were spread by people in high places who wanted the masses to do what they demanded. And it has recently come out that, like Fauci, for instance, he misled people. He lied and he was spreading disinformation, but he was telling other people that they were spreading disinformation, and he was able to deceive people because he, of course, mixed some facts in with lies. And when you do that, you're more likely to fool somebody than when you just simply lie an obvious lie. For instance, if I told somebody that my walls are white, right? But under this white paint, they used to be purple. If I told somebody that, even if it weren't the case, they might still believe me because, well, I see the walls are white. But if I dared to tell somebody, no, these walls, they're purple right now, no one would believe me, you know? So, so Satan also, who is the father of lies, he lied to Eve, yes, but it wasn't a full lie. So this is how he was able to deceive her, because he said that God knows that if you eat from the fruit, you will become as gods, knowing good and evil. And God knew this because he knows everything. Did we become like gods to know good and evil? Yes, we did. Now, there are some pastors, I'm sure, some pastors who might disagree with me and say, no, we didn't become like gods. How dare you say that? We're not like gods. There are some pastors who also think that Adam was not with Eve, but the Bible clearly says that he was with her. So why didn't he speak up? I don't know, but that's also where he messed up, because as the head, he should have spoken. He should have kept Eve from, eating of the fruit. And even if she ate, he should not have, because as the head, both of their eyes were opened when he ate from the fruit, because that whole circuit was complete at that point, right? The source from which Eve was taken ate, and she was contaminated and he was contaminated through that source, right? Because had Adam not eaten, I believe that Eve would not have been cursed, especially since she wasn't given the commandment not to eat of the fruit. At least I'll say this, the Bible doesn't say that she was given the commandment, but we know Adam definitely was. All right. So that being said, where were we going with this? Oh, yes. So God did know that Adam and Eve would become as gods. In fact, he ends up saying that. He says, behold, the man has become like one of us to know good and evil. Now, lest he, and God is speaking about Adam, because even if Eve grabbed it, the circuit wouldn't be complete, because sin was brought into the world through Adam, right? Adam was, you could think of it as he had a connection, maybe on a quantum level, with Eve, so that once Eve ate it, maybe he wasn't affected, but the moment he ate it, Eve was definitely affected, right? And so God says, behold, the man has become like one of us to know good and evil. Now, lest he reach out his hand and take also the tree of life and eat and live forever. ... That's Genesis 3, verse 22. We'll jump ahead to Genesis 4 and recap that, where it explains where murder comes from. Cain, what did I write here? Cain tries to hide his deed that he killed his brother. God reveals that he knows all things, because he lets Cain know that the blood of Abel is crying out to him. He already knows what Cain did, and he curses Cain to a nomadic life. Can you imagine if nothing grew for you? If you would go from place to place and every plant would just die? It would die slowly enough for you to eat what was on it for the day, maybe, but then the next day you just had to keep it moving, because that apple tree you ate from was now dead, right? So that's what Cain's life was like. Genesis 5 discusses genealogies up to Noah. Genesis 6 discusses how corruption entered the world. So fallen angels whom the world would worship worship as gods. They were false gods though. Those so-called gods, they mated with human women. So think Zeus, who mated with a human woman to have Hercules, for example, right? The stuff of ancient myths that caused people like Gilgamesh and Hercules to be born. That's what the Bible explains in Genesis chapter 6. So all these titans and demigods and things like that, don't dismiss them in other myths as if they are completely mythological. There's a lot of truth to that. What's interesting about the Bible is it talks about all of those other things, right? It's a concentrated collection of truth, but those other books, they don't talk about the Bible. So what's interesting is the Bible, every truth that you could find in other religions is found in the Bible. But what you find in other religions are watered down, and so you might find a truth here, right? A truth there or whatever, but it's not a collection of truth, of powerful, concentrated truths like you'll find in the Bible. So the Nephilim were born, right? Nephilim, they were the giants, the men of old, the men of renown, like Hercules, for example, or Gilgamesh, or the Titans, right? Now, Genesis 7. Noah builds an ark. He obeys God. The flood comes. All life on earth died outside the ark. So that being said, that's the recap for Genesis chapters 1 through 7. Hopefully that helps you guys with by providing or by, I don't know what I'm saying, it's kind of late. Hopefully this helps you guys better understand the first 7 chapters of the Bible. Okay, feel free to ask any questions in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer anything that I can for you. Okay, bye.